From Anshei Sphard-Beth Emeth congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parashat Chayay Sarah. Look at the bright side. If we look at the story of Chayay Sarah, right away it's the bright side. It's really the death of Sarah, but we call it Chayay Sarah, the life of Sarah. And the question is, at what point did she die? Why did she die? What was the cause of her death? We have two diametrically opposed views. See, there are two stories that preceded it. One, the story of the binding of Isaac, but that's not immediately preceding the story. The last thing in the last parsha, the maftir of the last parsha, Vayera, was the birth of children to Nahor, the brother of Avraham, and one of the grandchildren is Rivka. So Rivka is born. So is this story picking up on a continuation of the binding of Isaac? And then, as Rashi says, the Medrash says, there's only one continuum that you can imagine, which is that when she heard the terrible news of Isaac's being sacrificed and offered, even though he didn't die, she couldn't take it. She died from the anxiety of my son is being taken. Even the thought that he would be taken on the altar, that itself was enough to do her in. That's Rashi's Midrash. The Tzror Hamor, Spanish and Portuguese commentator, who said that no, she died with Seva Tova. Are you kidding? She died with such wonderful news. She died with the news that Rivka has been born. There's someone in her general family, Avraham and her family from the old country, who was born a perfect shidduch for Yitzchak. She dies laughing, looking into the future, thinking, oh, it's going to be Yitzchak, he'll marry Rivka, everything's going to be fine. Two views of how to look at the beginning of our parsha. Sort of dark view, she dies, the pall, the shadow of the binding of Isaac. Second view, she dies with the good news, Rivka has been born. Then we ask the question, why is this story so elaborate? What do we need this story for? Of course she died, but we don't always mention the death of every patriarch, matriarch. And the whole long story, he wanted to buy it, and how much did he pay for it, and how they negotiated it. It's more detail than we would usually get for a simple purchase. So again, we have two views. Yaakov Meidan, Yeshivat Har Tzion, others sort of let's call it a sort of a Zionist strand. Those are big supporters and big on the land of Israel, like to focus on the mitzvah of living in Israel, the mitzvah of conquering Israel. So they say, clearly, this is an entire chapter in the Torah because it's the first conquest in the land of Israel. We bought it fair and square, and there we began to show our generational connection to this land. A family plot is not just an individual plot. Abraham refused to accept an individual plot for Sarah. He wanted a family plot that would be for him and his wife and their children and theirs after that. And by having these multiple generations of Jews buried in the land of Israel, that would show our connection to the land of Israel. This story is about the land of Israel. And then we look in the Talmud and we see that they derive the laws of marriage from here. Is it marriage? From the purchase of a field? Isn't that comparing a woman to a field, a purchase? No, but what is this purchase? When Avraham buys the field, firstly, it's a romantic act. He's buying it on behalf of his wife to show that he wants death not do us part. Even though they are going to be separated by death, he wants to be buried next to her. He doesn't want to have a separate plot. Sarah over here and him over there. It's going to be together. It is romantic. It's the ultimate act of devotion even after his wife dies. Look what he goes through. He cries. He gives a eulogy. Avraham is the ultimate romantic even after death. And there's also a romantic connection with the land of Israel. When we purchase the land of Israel, it's beautiful. This connection with the land of Israel will be forever. Just like marriage, as Rabbi Rosenzweig and others have explained, that marriage is an eternal covenant. Well, it's true, there is a possibility of divorce, but marriage is structured to be forever. And therefore, when Abraham purchases the land forever, because marriage is also a purchase, not a purchase, but a connection you have to someone, That's forever. It's forevermore. There is that link between the two of you. And therefore, this is a perfect section to learn how to get married. From this idea that something was given to Ephron, you give something to the wife, that's how we learn how you marry a woman. So that's one view. Why was a story here? To tell us about the eternal connection of Jews, Israelites in the land of Israel, Abrahamites in the land of Israel. Second version comes from David Zvi Hoffman, famous rabbi from Germany, 19th century. And he says, oh, this is a terrible story. Here Abraham had conquered the whole land of Israel. In Parshat Lech Lecha, he conquered it top to bottom, Beersheba up to Dan, Sodom to Dan. He had conquered the whole land from north to south. He saved his nephew. He fought a war. He was respected. And when he wants to buy a measly plot to bury his wife, he has to go to court and he has to beg and plead and butter everyone up to get it. This is the promise that says, oh, to your children I will give this land. Are you kidding? In his own land, he's a stranger. He can't even get a family plot. He has to pay 400 silver pieces of good silver. It's a ridiculous price. You could buy, in those days, you could buy so many slaves, so many different valuable things for that price. It's a very high price. And that's what you have to do. This is terrible. It's a sign of galut. So isn't that interesting? Rabbi David Zvi Hoffman sees this as a sign of the promise is not yet fulfilled. It shows the great emunah and the great faith that Abraham had, that even though he had all these trials and travails, he still was promised the land of Israel. Or is this a sign of Geulah, the beginning of redemption, the beginning of the connection of the Jewish people and Israel forevermore in the deepest kind of romantic kind of way? Or is it both? If we look really at both of these questions, maybe we could say it's both. Does Sarah die with a hope for Isaac in her heart? Of course she does. Does she die with the horror of the image of Isaac almost slaughtered? Of course she does. Is this story a tragic story of a man, supposedly the master of the land, who has to beg for a mere plot of land in it? Yes, it is. And is it a story of a man with a new love affair for his wife and for the land of Israel? Yes, it is. It can be both. A person can have the anxiety of a child and also the hope of a child at the same time. A person can have the suffering in the land of Israel and also the hope for the land of Israel, all at the same time. Today in Israel, Jews often suffer from stabbings and bombings and all kinds of wars and all kinds of problems. Having to send their children off to war, I hope that should end one day. Jews should be able to live in Israel without having to have a standing civilian army. They should be able to just live like we do here, peacefully. But is that the tragedy or is that the greatness? Yes, it's tragic. How many lives have been lost? But it's also an amazing love story of the Jewish people and the land of Israel, and the story of the rebirth of the land of Israel. Life is complex, and often there is a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and a lot of complexity, a lot of sadness, a lot of joy, all mixed in together. The question is, how do we look at the bright side? Comes to Sarah's death. Tzorah Amor said, let's look at the bright side. She died knowing the future had possibilities and options. Comes to why we have this story, let's look at the bright side. A man made an eternal connection, the land of Israel. To this day, a person comes to Hebron, comes to the land of Israel, he knows that in this land are buried my ancestors, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshei Sphard-Beth Emeth congregation for a discussion of Parshat Chayay. Join us each week for the discussion of the holidays. We also have a Mary Hiking Dumont series going on now. Join us Wednesday evenings for the class. We'll have it up on YouTube as well, and on yutorah.org as well. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.